Hello, this is a video where we explain the main function in JavaScript assignment 7, and we left off with an explanation of line 23 and the function that it calls, and now we're looking at line 27. In line 27, we see something we saw before, document get element by ID. However, this time we are not writing to the inner HTML. This time we are going to do something on click. So what we're going to do here is every time something that has the ID of go, the string go, G-O, anytime something that has that ID, which should only be one thing on the page because it's an ID, is clicked, this thing will happen. And what is this thing? This is a function. So a function will run whenever go is clicked. And as you can see, when you look at the HTML, the button with the name go written on it has the ID go. So basically your JavaScript is listening for any click on that button. And when you click it, this thing will run. So what is this thing? It is the function that begins on line 30. And it looks a little bit long, but it's actually not a very complicated function because it has a lot of little helper functions. And so you've got a little compact, nice function that's easy to understand, and it is called by this function one at a time. So it's very modular. This is considered a good practice for writing code, and it helps you sort of keep track of everything. So let's scroll up and see how long the climber result function is. It goes down to line 51, all right? So it spans from line 30 to line 51, so it is 21 lines. But most of it is a big long if statement inside the function, right? Another thing beginners have trouble with is, oh, can I put an if inside a function? Of course you can. You can put an if inside a function. You can put a for loop inside a function. You can put a while loop inside a function. Functions are bundles of instructions, so you can put all kinds of stuff inside. You can even call another function from inside a function, and we do that a lot. So let's just look at the if part. Okay, the function starts on line 30, and below that it immediately starts with an if. We already talked about this first if, the first part of our if statement, the first condition. We talked about it in the first video about this assignment. So we talked about if health ever goes down to 0, basically the whole script just stops, the game ends, you can't do anything because your health hits 0, okay? What about the next step, else if? That step is only 2 lines. Lines 36 and 37. Why is it only 2 lines? Because it says if somebody checked climb, and remember nothing happens unless we've clicked go, right, in this function. If somebody selected climb, they clicked beside climb, and then they pressed go, they clicked go, what happens? This function happens. This brand new external tiny little function, which you're going to see in a moment, that function will run, but only if somebody clicked climb and go. Where is that function? Climb action? It is right here. And we already went over that in video 1, so I'm not going to go over it again. All right, so back up into our main function. We already went over this. What's the next part of our if statement? If health was not 0, if climb was not checked, well, maybe eat was checked. So if eat was checked and somebody pressed go, what happens? This. What is this on line 39? It is another little tiny function. But this is the first one that is left for you. This is part of your assignment. This little eat function, eat action, pretty much nothing happening in there. This was explained in video 1. Not going to explain it again. But this function outside the main function is going to be a little compact tidy little function similar to climb action, but not the same, because climbing and eating are not the same thing. In the game, they're going to have different results. Okay, back up. Health, better than 0, we go to the next thing. Climb, not checked, we go to the next thing. Eat, not checked, go to the next thing. Next thing, rest. You're used to this pattern now. What happens if somebody clicked rest, then they clicked go? What happens? We jump to another tiny little function. This one, and this is also one that is not yet written. Your job is to write this. What happens to the climber when she takes a rest? What things change? Which variables have a new value because she rested? Okay? Now we're almost at the end of our if statement, right? If, else if, else if, else if, and the last thing in an if statement is almost always, not always, but almost always else. In other words, if anything else happened when somebody clicked go, do this. What is this? In this case, else. If everything else was not true, then do this. What is this? Message becomes the value of M6. What was M6? Remember, all our messages are stored at the top with our variables. This is M6. Here in line 15, you must select an option before you click go. How is that going to be written, and where is it going to be written? Well, all the messages are always written by that function that we looked at in video 2. All the way at the bottom here, this one. So any time that go is clicked, this function will run, and the very last thing it will do is it will write the message into the narration paragraph, which is the yellow box. So if we go over to our excellent fiddle, and we climb for a bit, and then I forget to click anything. So right now, what's my health? It's not 0. Is climb clicked? No. Is eat clicked? No. Is rest clicked? No. And I click go. What happens to the message? The message says you must select an option before you click go. In other words, it's like an error message. And that is what happened at the bottom of my if in my function climber result. The very, very last thing ending my if statement was an else that said, if nothing is checked, if health is greater than 0, in other words, all the other things were false, then make message have M6 as its contents, its value. And M6 is the message that says you must select an option before you click go. So this is a very tidy, neat little if statement. But our function climber result, it continues farther than that, okay? So we've talked about the entire if statement. What happens next? We did talk about this in an earlier video, but just to review, when the if statement has finished, if we have run the climb action function, position will be different now because we will have climbed up another 100 feet. So we need to change what's the distance that's left to us because now we're higher up, so we have less distance to cover. That's what this line is doing. Finally, the very, very, very last line of our main function, climber result, very important to not put S's where they don't belong. The very last thing that function does is it calls the function named write results. Yes, this is the function that we spent time on in video 2. This function down at the very bottom. Yeah, that function has to be called and executed every time that go is pressed, because that function is what changes all the HTML. That's the function that writes a new message. That's the function that writes new numbers for our food and our position and our health. And, anything that's written, it all happens because of the 5 lines, the 5 instructions bundled up in this one function. So the last thing that our climber result does, climber result function, the last thing it does is this. It's not part of the if, it happens no matter what. If the function climber result runs, this runs, meaning that function that writes everything runs. So we've gotten to the end of our climber result function. Mostly it's a big sequence of if, else, 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 and a final else. Then it makes sure that we have updated how much distance is left for us to climb. And finally, it writes all the new information onto the page. So what else is left in our function? Well, in fact, very little. We have already totally covered this in video 2. And we have covered these 4 functions in video 1. So I'm reviewing, okay? So the function climb action, the one that starts on line 55, that one is pretty much finished. I don't think you need to change anything there. But you need to add lines as instructed, as explained in the assignment, to make eat action work. You need to add lines inside rest action to make rest action work as a function, to make it do things. And finally, probably the trickiest thing, so do this last, is you want to create a goat attack. And that is another function. And to do that, you will, of course, go in between the curly braces and you will write things in here, right? I don't know what things you're going to write, but you will think of something. I'll make those go away, all right? So we have, in fact, covered every single line of this JavaScript. But most of it is already set for you, already fixed, already figured out. Your task is really to concentrate on the 3 tiny little helper functions that you are going to modify so that the game plays more like a game. So good luck with this. This is your walkthrough. And hopefully by looking at this and the other 2 videos, you will be able to understand the parts of the script that are already working for you, like a well-oiled machine, like a humming little motor. And you just need to add your contributions so that the game can do more things, so that the climber can eat, so that the climber can rest, and so that the climber is sometimes attacked by a goat.